Okay, we're going to be taking a look at the game Gettysburg High Tide of the Confederacy, published by Phoenix Games in 1982 and designed by Peter Bertram. But before we do that, I was doing some research on Board Game Geek because I think it's about time we defined the parameters of a Gettysburg game to make any sense of this whole thing. Now, everybody's count is going to be a bit different, but looking at Board Game Geek, I decided to look at Gettysburg games, board games. Now, I did not consider miniatures rules or card games or anything like that, so I tried to keep it down to just board war games. And this is what I generally discovered. Again, your count may be different. There's been published about 65 games on the Battle of Gettysburg since 1958. Of those 65, 6 of them I would consider to be strategic or operational, games that cover more of the campaign. 11 of the games concerned tactical aspects of the Battle of Gettysburg, or only sections of the battle, like the Battle for Little Round Top or Longstreet's Assault, that kind of thing. 27 of the games concerned the entire battle, and of those 27, 21 of them consisted of one board only, because we have to define the parameters in the sense that, is a person interested in Terrible Swift Sword, which is a regimental battery game, gigantic monster game, 3 maps, thousands of counters, takes maybe 100 hours to play, or are they talking about, the 1958 edition of Gettysburg, which, can be played in a couple of hours and is one map. So within those parameters, that's how we can discuss Gettysburg High Tide of the Confederacy. Now, my personal preference for Gettysburg games are one-map games that cover the entire battle, usually brigade level, and I would like to be played between 4 and 6 hours. Beyond 6 hours, getting into a whole different ball game. For example, Terrible Sword, I did a video on that already. You're talking a huge investment of time. Regimental battery, hundreds of hours to play. So it is within that definition that we'll talk about High Tide of the Confederacy. Now, in my previous videos, I mentioned that one of my favorite games within those parameters was the intermediate level game of Gettysburg, designed in 1977 by Avalon Hill. I thought it was a very good game. Had its issues, but it was good. But my favorite, again with those parameters, was Gettysburg, Lee's Greatest Gamble. Again, a one-mapper, could be played in a few hours, and I thought was a very good game. But High Tide of the Confederacy. Well, I owned this in 1982 and didn't give it much attention. And for the life of me, I don't know why. I was a much younger man in those days, and I don't know why I didn't pay much attention to this game. There must have been something about it I didn't like. But I repurchased it, and I've been going over it and solitaring it, and for the life of me, I can't understand why I didn't like it back then. I think this is a very fine game, and it's vying for first place in my affections for my favorite Gettysburg game, again within those parameters. If you ask anyone, what's their favorite Gettysburg game, you have to define your parameters. What do you mean by that? Because you're really discussing apples and oranges when you're talking about a game like High Tide of Confederacy and Terrible Swift Sword or 3 Days in July. So let's take a look at the pieces and the components to High Tide of the Confederacy and see why I like this little gem of a game. Okay, I know what attracted me to this game in the first place. It was the superb artwork by the artist James Alexander Walker. He lived in the last century, died in 1898, so it's quite an old painting. And this is not the entire painting. It was a very widescreen kind of thing, and went off to the right a bit more. It shows Pender's division attacking down the Chambersburg Pike. Here's Gettysburg here, and I get a kick out of the railroad cut here. It's a little exaggerated, but it's kind of neat. I believe that's Pennsylvania College. Anyway, that's what attracted me to the game in the first place was the cover artwork. Now, I'll show you the board and counters and stuff. The counters I've cut out and clipped, and I've organized them in their logical manner. Put the Union in their corps and the Confederates in their divisions. You get a bunch of these numbered step reduction markers, and I'll show you how they worked, because they work kind of differently than other games. Now, the map. It's a one mapper showing the entire battlefield of Gettysburg, and it's what I call very minimalistic, you might say. There's not a lot of terrain features, but the ones that are important are there, and we'll take a closer look in a moment. It's very spare, and the ridges are done with this dark line to show the ridges, like McPherson's, or Hers Ridge, Seminary Ridge, Cemetery Hill. The buildings in the town are drawn in this little wee kind of what I call cartoonish form, which I like. There's a period charm to this game. And let's take a closer look at the map first before we look at the counters. Okay, we'll take a little tour of the battlefield, just like we were in a car driving at the park. So there's the town of Gettysburg here, with the town square, of course. We'll go up the Chambersburg Pike. There's the Thompson House, which was Lee's headquarters. You can see the railroad cut is shown just as a gap in the ridge, which is fine. And Hers Tavern, McPherson's Barn, and out the Chambersburg Pike to where the Confederates come in. To the north, we've got the Carlisle and Bendersville roads, and the Harrisburg Road, Hunterstown Road. That's where Early and the boys come in. He's got something that was used in Terrible Swift Sword too, an entry area in each one. So, for example, you've got entry area E, D, C, B over here, and A. So what's the big deal about that? Well, most games have the troops come in on the road. This one changed it a little bit, and I like it, because traditionally, when Rhodes' division comes in, he kind of just piles down the Carlisle or Bendersville Road and column, and onto the battlefield he goes. And many games have no reason for Rhodes to come in here on Oak Ridge, as he did historically. So in this game, at least you come in on an area, and you can come in on an area in line or in column down the road. So I like that option, and that's the same for the Union entry areas too. Let's go to the east of Gettysburg. There's your Hanover Road, Benner's Hill, where the Confederates put batteries, and Culp's Hill, of course, and the hill we all know, Cemetery Hill, and the McMillan House over here in Seminary Ridge, and of course the famous Emmitsburg Road with the Cadore and Bryan Farm. Across these fields is where Pickett made his charge. And we'll swing down here to Big Round Top and Little Round Top. I like the way the trees are depicted. They're, again, this little cartoonish form, and I don't mind that at all. I find there's just a pleasant charm to this game. And there's the Peach Orchard and the Rogers House. And behind the Confederate lines, the Pitzer School and the Pitzer House. And Rock Creek over to the right. Now, anyone who's been to Gettysburg knows that the whole area is very gently rolling hills, and the terrain is not an impediment to the movement of troops. I would say the main impediment would be Rock Creek itself and maybe Willoughby Run. But for those of you who visited the battlefield, you can do a leisurely walk from Seminary Ridge to Cemetery Hill, no problem at all. So I like the map. I think it's very well done, and it's got a nice period charm to it. Okay, there's some sample Union units. These are just 2 units of the Artillery Reserve. The blue side up is the side when they're unlimbered, of course. That's their combat number, name of the unit. And on the below it is another counter, flipped. So when they flip, of course, they're limbered up and ready to move. That's the way the artillery works. Now, the counters for the artillery in this game are battalions, not batteries. Now, battalions in the Civil War were a number of batteries, and Union battalions usually had about, I think, 4 to 6 batteries. A battery's about 6 guns. So these represent, like, 36 guns. The Confederates are a bit smaller. Let's look at some infantry. Okay, kind of a weird symbol. He's chosen to show a infantryman firing as if you're looking straight down on him. So that's his arms, of course, and the rifle sticking out. These happen to be, that's a cavalry unit, that's the 2nd Division of the 12th Corps. Again, the combat number. The flip side on this one is when they've taken casualties and have reached about half strength. And I'll get to that when I show you the number markers. So that's the infantry counters. Now leaders, you get, of course, all the standard leaders we all know by name now. Slocum, Geary, they're kind of basic. Showing the number of stars for a corps leader, his command value, and that's a division leader. So the leaders in this game are division and corps. You got some interesting little column counters, which you use when a infantry unit is on the road in column. You put one of these on them. Shows a silhouette of men marching. You pay movement points to convert to column and back to line. All you do is take the column marker off when you've gone to line. The frontal hexes for infantry in this game are these 3 frontal hexes, 2 flank, and a rear hex. So that's the basics of infantry. You get these on the other side of the column counters, or cute little route counters, men running away. And the entrenchments were kind of neat. You get one side of a man digging the entrenchment. When it's completed, you get these little wee log barricades. And I believe in the game only the Union can entrench. Let's take a look at the Confederates, and that's my only little wee mini nitpick with the game. Look of the Confederate units. Okay, I like to see the Confederates in gray. I didn't really like the color choice of this kind of yellow. Okay, you can sort of imagine they're maybe butternut, but I do prefer the Confederates in gray. But the counters are perfectly serviceable using the same silhouette system that the Union does. Now the cavalry for the Confederates are in gray. I don't know why they did that. You certainly know right away that they're cavalry because of the color. Again, they show a top-down view of the cavalry. That's when he's dismounted. And you can see a man with his arm extended firing a pistol. And this game is a little bit different in the sense that when you mount up, you don't flip the other side. The other side is still the unit at 50% casualties. But if you mount up, you put this little mounted marker on it, and away you go. The cavalry can move quickly. Let's take a look at some of the support units. Okay, nothing out of the ordinary there. Your basic markers here to indicate casualties, which you mark on the casualty track for the single digits, tens, and I guess hundreds if you ever get that high, and the hour and the day markers. Beyond that, that's pretty well what the counters look like. Perfectly serviceable. They're nice and clear, and they look pretty good once you get them on the game too. Okay, there's your terrain effects on movement, printed right on the board. The infantry has a movement of 7, and the artillery has a movement of 7. Horse artillery 10, leaders and mounted cavalry 12. So that gives you an idea of what stuff costs. Wood slope costs 3, woods cost 2, slope costs 2. So you're not going to be darting around long distances in this game, although roads are 1/2 for infantry and column and 1/3 of a point for limbered artillery. So you can scoot along the roads pretty nice. And there's your crest costs. So the turns are 1 hour each, as most brigade level games on Gettysburg are. And his order of appearance is well done. It's researched, and he's taken advantage of research that has come before. So in studying the order of appearance, I found it to be quite serviceable. I always check for the arrival of particular units, because we now know the order of appearance for the Battle of Gettysburg right down to pretty well almost every regiment and brigade. So I always like to check for Rowley's division. That's the Union, because that's the one that got lost there to the west. But there's no road network to the west here on this game. So he has Rowley arriving on the Emmitsburg Road, which is perfectly fine. The fact that Rowley sort of wandered off to the west here doesn't really matter for game purposes. In Gettysburg 77, Rowley does come in on the Hagerstown Road here, around the Confederate right flank, so that does make a difference. But in this game, you'll probably want to stick to the Emmitsburg Road. That's about the only little difference from the historical order of appearance that I saw. This is the order of appearance card. It's very basic. By the way, the combat results cards are very basic. They're just black and white. There's almost no use of color at all, but they're perfectly serviceable. Combat-related tables, fire strength modifiers, more tables on the back. Now, the designer also did a Chickamauga game, and I see that he rethought the tables a bit. I think it worked out that some people found these tables were a little bit too bloody, so he has uploaded the Chickamauga table from his Chickamauga game, and it makes the table less bloody. When I played it, I used the original one, and I thought it was perfectly fine, but I did find the casualties a tad high, so next time I play it, I probably might use the Chickamauga table. Now, the number counters. That's maybe what turned me off back in the 80s, I don't know, but I'll show you how they work. Okay, the step reduction counters in this game worked a bit different than other games we've seen. At first, I didn't like it very much, because they're multi-directional, and there's several of them. Example, your unit's at 20, he takes a casualty, you can flip it to a 19, an 18, a 17, and so on, and then later flip it or change it for another counter of lower value. So he was able to save a lot of counters by having really 4 strength points in one, which was kind of nice, and they're color-coded too. It just takes getting some used to. Plus, you have to be very careful when playing the game that you orient the unit properly. So if the 2nd Division here of the 12th Corps is oriented like that, he's obviously a 12. If he takes a step, you turn it 90 degrees and so on. But you have to be careful about bumping these counters to keep their integrity, strength integrity intact. Now compare that to, let's say, Terribles of Sword. Terribles of Sword had number markers, all right, hosts of them, like many games do. 1 and 2, obviously, 3s and 4s, 5s and 6s, 7 and 8s, all that. You had to have a whole host of counters with the game like Terribles of Sword. But with this one, the author was able to cut down on the number of counters by making them multi-functional. So you really have 4 numbers on one side, 4 on the other. So this almost replaced, 4 or 5 counters. Like I said, it takes some getting used to, but it's a perfectly serviceable method for showing step reduction. Okay, a couple of things about this game that make it different from Gettysburg 77, and different also than Paul Koenig's remake of that game, Gettysburg Bloody July. Both those games did not have long-range artillery, and that was a mistake. Just plainly, it was a mistake. Because in those games, you galloped up your battalion-level artillery right into primary to fire, and that really didn't make any sense. These are battalions, like I said. They represent, 5 or 6 different batteries, 30 guns. They just didn't gallop up into point-blank range and fire. But in Gettysburg 77 and Bloody July, that's what you do. But I now see why I'm beginning to warm up to this game. This game does have ranged artillery, and it's a pretty good range too, because on the table you've got unlimbered artillery can fire up to 8 hexes. Granted, it's half fire, and 3 to 6 is basic fire. 2 hexes, it's doubled fire, and point blank, it's times 3 fire. And they've got this, the Confederate Whitworth cannon here. And an interesting story about these particular guns. There's the counter for it there, Whitworth rifles. These particular cannon, there were only 2 of them at Gettysburg, and the Confederates had them. They deployed on Oak Ridge on July 1st, and that's where they are today. You can actually see them at the park. And these guns had an incredible range. They actually could fire close to 4 miles. And guns here, Confederate guns on Oak Ridge, Whitworth rifles, firing could actually hit Little Round Top. And that's 4 miles away. And I know park rangers in past archaeological investigations have found Whitworth bolts in this vicinity. Now, let's get real here. You're not going to have any kind of accuracy firing 4 miles. But you can imagine the demoralization of Union troops. You know, you're sitting here on Little Round Top, someone's firing at you and say, hey, where's that gun firing from, Jeb? Oh, it's just a gun 4 miles away. Yeah, okay. You can imagine what that does to morale. Anyway, just to illustrate that there is long-range artillery in this game, which means you can do these duels, which they did historically, from Seminary Ridge to Cemetery Ridge. Oh, you might not get a lot of hits, but you can do it in the game, and that's why I really like it. It's a brigade-level game that has ranged artillery with hourly turns. And I only wish Gettysburg 77 had been designed that way, but it was not. So that's a nice feature of this game, ranged artillery. Okay, there's a typical scene that we've all seen before for an opening move of Gettysburg. This is after the Confederates have moved, and you've got your Devon and Gamble brigades that we all know, and Tidball's battery and Buford present, trying to slow down Heath's division as it moves down the pike. Now, one thing this game has as rules, again, that makes it different than a lot of other brigade games I've seen. And I really like this rule. And it's quite simple. There is no stacking. And I mean no stacking. You can put leaders on, of course, but there's no infantry units or cavalry units on top of other ones. No stacking at all. And that includes artillery. That takes a bit of getting used to, because we're all used to putting, cavalry brigades down, stacking artillery on it, and away you go. Not in this game. Which makes, you say, well, doesn't that make the artillery rather vulnerable? Well, yes and no. It makes you use the artillery the way it's supposed to be used. So, for example, you'd have your cavalry, let's say, in front here, below the ridge, and your artillery behind, being able to fire over it. So you've got to use historical artillery tactics, use it the proper way. You can't just put them into primary, and you won't be wanting to charge in with artillery alone against infantry. So the non-stacking makes the game extremely linear, which is what I like to see in war games in general. I really don't like games where units are just stacked all over the place and you're moving these little wee skyscrapers around, that kind of thing. I really don't like that. Of course, depending on the game and the scale, you have to allow stacking. But in this game, the scale he's chosen, there is no stacking, and it works perfectly well. I really like it. It also means you're going to have to choose your fields of fire very carefully. Sure, the artillery can fire 7 or 8 hexes, but try and find positions where they can. You've got blocking terrain everywhere, so you have to use your artillery sensibly for a change, and I like that. Too many games for the Civil War, I see that artillery, they're just like movable tanks. You just move them around, they're faster, and they go over the heck they want into primary. That's complete nonsense. And I've never understood why every game, including this one, they always have artillery moving faster than infantry. Now, granted, this is horse artillery, so it should move faster. But artillery, no, I made a mistake. Artillery moves 7, which is the same as infantry, which I like. Many games have artillery moving faster than infantry, and that's wrong. Artillery did not move faster than infantry, most of the artillerymen walked with their guns. They weren't necessarily faster. Just because there's horses pulling the guns doesn't mean that they're faster. So the game has got that right. So this game has a lot of things right at the brigade level, and quite simply that's why I like it. Now I'll end the video with the rules themselves. I'm amazed that they got so much into this game, and I think it was 7 pages of rules. I couldn't believe it. It's really a simple game, but a real good one. And even 1 or 2 of those pages is just the scenarios. There was 1 sheet of errata that came with the game. Nothing critical, nothing that a veteran couldn't figure out. Most of it was just little typos. Nothing really bad. 1 single sheet, and it came with the game. So you'll have no trouble learning this game at all. Now consider that Gettysburg 88 by Avalon Hill, I think, has just 1 sheet of rules. Intermediate Gettysburg had about the same rules too, I think about 7 pages. So this game is comparable to Gettysburg 77 and Lee's Last Gamble. So that's it for Gettysburg High Tide to the Confederacy. I think it's tied for first place for my favorite Gettysburg game based on those parameters that I described at the beginning of the video. So if you get a chance to pick this up, you might want to. It's not rare, by the way. I've seen copies. I got mine brand new, mint. And like I said, this was designed in '81, and I got a mint sealed copy from the Sentry Box in Calgary. And I know they're around. I've seen them on eBay. It is not a rare game. And I think it's certainly better than some of the newer games like Gettysburg 150 from Worthington. And it's a good game. Anyway, thank you for watching.